The 83 years old British esotericist Benjamin Creme has been travelling around the world for over 30 years now, giving lectures on a most intriguing message of hope for mankind. He recently visited Amsterdam again and gave a lecture at the Royal Tropical Institute. In the course of his lecture he made some remarkable statements on current human affairs in a world in turmoil. Dutch journalist Moti Marhe had an interview with Mr. Creme at the Share International Center.
Mr. Creme, you are most welcome in our program.
Thank you.
You travel around the world with a very extraordinary message. Could you tell in short what's your message?
Well, in short it's difficult, but I will do my best. It's a big message. It's nothing less than at this time in history, when so much is at stake for peace or war, maybe the destruction of humanity, an extraordinary happening is taking place. I'm talking about the entry into our lives of the spiritual hierarchy which has stood behind humanity from the earliest days of humanity. We call them the Masters of Wisdom. This is a group of men like us who have evolved beyond us, evolved to a point which is like a new kingdom in the world. We imagine we are the top kingdom, humanity, but no, out of humanity has grown and is growing another kingdom, the spiritual kingdom. They're the most evolved people of humanity, stand behind the world, helping the others to evolve, guiding, protecting, inspiring, teaching. That group have always been there, so we have always had help. Now they're beginning to come out into the everyday world with their leader, a great teacher called the World Teacher, that's the office that he has, who is awaited by all the religious groups under one name or another. Christians await him as the coming of the Christ. Jews await him as the Messiah. Muslims await him as the Imam Mahdi. Hindus await him as Krishna returned or Kalki avatar. Buddhists await him under his name. They have his own name. They are awaiting the coming of Maitreya Buddha, the fifth Buddha, forecast to come now by Gautama Buddha, 2,600 years ago. And he has come now. He is living in London, England, has been there since July 19th, 1977. And one by one, his disciples, the masters, are coming themselves into the world. There are now 14 such masters in the world.
This is a very unusual thing you are telling about.
Absolutely.
Because we as human beings, most of us think we live here and we only live once. What relationship does this hierarchy have with us people? Are they gods apart from us?
They're not God. Maitreya is not God, and he is the master of all the masters, but they have revealed the divinity. Each one of us, everyone in the world, is a soul in incarnation, and has made hundreds and hundreds, thousands of incarnations to bring us to the point where we are now. The masters are one of us, but have gone on beyond us and revealed the divinity. So in a sense, they are God-like. But they are our mentors to bring us to that same divinity.
So in the end, we also will grow to that level.
All of us will be masters as they are masters.
So behind this answer lies the concept of reincarnation.
It is absolutely basic to life. Two great laws underlie life on earth. The law of rebirth. The soul takes a new body after death and returns as a man or a woman, it depends on the incarnation, and it does this over and over and over again until gradually, through that body, in that particular incarnation, the soul can express itself better than ever before. And when this starts, you begin to finish the incarnational process. And the masters don't need to incarnate again. They have, as far as this planet is concerned, they have reached the top.
And that top, is it to be compared what Hindus call moksha?
They are released. Moksha means release, and they are released. They're released from the obligation of taking incarnation again. But many of the masters do take incarnation in order to serve the plan of evolution in which we are all engaged. So it's a service from them, not an obligation.
And I started asking you about your travels around the world. Can you tell us where you are going around giving lectures, and when did you start, and how long are you busy with this work?
I was contacted by one of the masters way back 1959, January 1959.
And that's at your home?
Yes, at my home. A man came to me, a man who already had the contact. I knew about the masters. I had read about the masters. I believed in their existence, but I didn't expect any kind of contact. It was a complete surprise to me. This man told me that the masters were trying to contact me. I said, no, it's not true. He said, yes, it's true, and I have been told to come and tell you it's true. I said, but I don't hear a thing. Normally, it's a telepathic rapport that they establish. He said, no, the messages come to you, but they just bounce off you. I said, but why? He said, well, because you're not open. I said, I didn't know what open meant. He said, I said, I believe in them, it's not that. He said, no, but the channel between you and them are not open to hear. It's a hearing channel. And he said, don't worry, it'll come. And literally within about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, at the beginning of January 1959, 3rd of January, a voice suddenly appeared in my head. It's clear as a bell. It was one of the bridges, Blackfriars Bridge.
In London?
In London. One of the bridges over London. I knew Blackfriars. Go to Blackfriars Bridge, south side, the Blackheath side, and it gave me a date. It was about 3 weeks ahead. And when I went there on that date, there was nobody there, but there was a car waiting at the far end of the bridge, and in it were some people I didn't know, but one was the person, not a master, one was the person who had come and told me that I was receiving these contacts. And it just started from there. Mm-hmm. And then the master began, without sending me anywhere, just at home, he told me to get a tape recorder. I got a tape recorder, a little Grundig portable, and he began to give me long messages, it was re-establishing, cementing the telepathic rapport. As it got better and better, the more he dictated, I just mouthed what I had onto a tape, and then one day in March 1959, he said, now switch off the machine and kneel down. I wonder what's going to happen now. He said, now our master, Maitreya himself, has something important to tell you. I thought, wow, this is extraordinary. And I was kneeling. I'm not good at kneeling, but I was kneeling. And then an extraordinary energy came down on me like a ton of bricks, It was so powerful. I began to shake. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I didn't feel sorry or sad or anything, but it was an automatic reaction. My heart turned over. It was literally, I was filled with the love of the whole world. It was extraordinary. And while this was going on, I was given a vision of how the masters see time. And if I looked, I was in a big sphere of white light, and if I looked to the right, I could see all the events of the past which were still taking place. And I thought I could recognize, battles, kings and queens from history. And if I looked to the left, all the events of the future, which have yet to happen. But it was all happening simultaneously. I could see myself in the future. I could see thousands of people. I could see Maitreya talking to the crowds. And it was an extraordinary experience. And that's how the masters see time, as one moment, when everything is taking place at one moment. There's no such thing as time as we know it.
But some critic or skeptic person could say, isn't that hallucination?
He could say that, but it isn't true. I'm not hallucinating. It is absolutely, completely factual, exactly as it happened. And while this was taking place, Maitreya's voice began to appear in the middle of it. And he said, I myself am coming, sooner than anyone thinks possible. It will be in about 20 years. In the event, it was 18 years. And he said, and you will have a role to play in my coming if you accept it. And I felt total free will. There was no pressure, we hope you will do it and be nice, and nothing like that. It was just, you will have a role to play if you accept it. And then that's all he said. And I was filled with the love of all the world. What could I say? It's right, I'm your man, whatever it takes. And it was 20 years time. It was a long time ahead. I felt lots and lots of time to be prepared for that,
That means that you had to leave your profession. What was your profession?
I'm a painter.
You are
an artist, yes.
And how do you earn a living now?
Through my painting.
Still
I don't take any money from any of the spiritual work. That is, I've written about 10 books, and they're published, and published by Share International, and I don't take royalties. I don't make any money from this work.
You mentioned the name Share International. We'll come on later on.
Yes, Share International is a magazine. It's also a foundation, and I'm the chief editor of the magazine, which is a monthly magazine.
So you go around the world, you lecture to audiences. How do you bring your message as a dogma? Because this is your truth. You are convinced of it.
I am absolutely 100% convinced that this is true.
But the audience?
No, I present it for people to look at, to think about, for their consideration. I make a point before every lecture to isolate myself from this. This is not dogma. Don't believe it unless it makes you have a sense of truth in it for yourself. Keep an open mind, and that's all I ask.
And if we consider these activities of yours in these 30 years, some people came to know about Maitreya and hierarchy, but as a whole, humanity doesn't know anything about
your work.
There are
6.5 billion people in the world, and I recently asked my master, I have a contact with the master, I can ask him any time.
Telepathically?
Telepathically, yeah. He lives in the Himalayas, I live in London, and here I'm in Holland, but we can talk anytime. And I asked him how many people totally had heard this message. And he said about 30 million people have heard this message. And I said, how many of them are open-minded about the message? He said about 20 million people. 20 million have an open-minded belief. Doesn't mean they're convinced or truly believe it, but they're open to it being possible. They're open to the possibility. And how many really totally convinced? He said about 2 million people. So it's quite a big proportion.
And among them, are there also politicians, world leaders, presidents?
Well, Maitreya himself has met with, as a deliberate part of his work behind the scenes, he's met with world leaders, people of household names, people who have made their mark on history and so on. Heads of governments, people in the diplomatic service, businessmen, social people, the whole gamut, right down to ordinary people in the street. And he appears to them, to those who can work for him. He tells them what his priorities are, what his plans are, and so on. And if they are open, they take it on board.
Because now I would like to know, what are the plans of Maitreya? What is the message he is bringing to us, and what is his concern about things going on Earth?
His concern is that we shouldn't destroy ourselves, because it's perfectly possible.
Are we in that situation to destroy ourselves?
No, we have the capacity. For the first time in history, we have the atomic bomb. And America, Russia, Britain, France, and China have a huge arsenal of these bombs. And there are 24 nations altogether, some openly and some under the counter, have an atomic bomb. Places like Israel, for example, like South Africa, like Pakistan and India more openly. The 24 nations have such a bomb, and 28 nations have what are generally called weapons of mass destruction. Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction and have not been found, but was attacked on the pretense that it had weapons of mass destruction. Israel has plenty of weapons of mass destruction, both atomic and biological, and so on, chemical, and so have many, many nations, 28 in all. And so the situation in the world is fraught. If we have powerful countries like America or China or Russia ready to use their weapons of mass destruction, or even just their armies and navies and air forces to attack small countries who can't hit back, then we can mount a context in which we are moving further and further to a world war. And the major concern of Maitreya is that 1/3 of the world, that's us, the developed third of the world, mainly the Western nations with Japan in the East, usurp and waste 3/4 of the world's food and 83% of all the other resources. So that 2/3 of the world's population, 2/3 in the mainly Eastern nations, have to make do with 17% of the world's resources. And millions of them are starving to death as we speak. And 1/5 of the world's population, 12 to 1,300 million people, live on $1 a day or less. And that is what concerns Maitreya. The discrepancy in living standards between the developed nations and the developing nations have within them the seeds of a third world war. That would be nuclear and would destroy all life, human and subhuman alike. That's the major concern of Maitreya. And so, in a word, if you could say, what is Maitreya about? He is about sharing the resources of the world. He says, there will never be peace in the world while there is injustice. This injustice is wrecking the lives of 2/3 of the world's population. And while this injustice reigns, there will never be peace, there will always be terrorism. There's only one end to terrorism, one end to war, and that is to share the resources of the world. So everything comes down to the principle of sharing. When we share, we create justice in the world. When we create justice, we create peace and the end of terror, and not before.
You are talking about a world divided into rich countries now and the developing world, the poorer countries. But there are people who think those people dying of hunger, it's their own karma. They should walk it out. What do your master or do Maitreya?
Maitreya says about this wrong interpretation of karma. He says nobody, not one single human being, comes into incarnation with the karma to die. He might have the karma to be sick, to be ill, to have cancer, to have this or that or the other, to be poor, yes, to be rich, yes, but not to die of starvation. No one comes into the world to starve. It's against the law of life. Even a worm eats. We wouldn't eat the same food as a worm, but even a worm needs food to eat. Likewise, every human being who comes into incarnation has the God-given right to eat. And what we have to eat, the food of the world, the bounty of the earth, is a gift. And we are the stewards only of that gift. We are meant to share it among all humanity. And it's the illegal and cruel misuse of economic laws that make it possible for some nations to grow big and powerful at the expense of the other nations. And it's called market forces. And Maitreya calls market forces the forces of evil. He says they benefit the few at the expense of the many. They have intrinsically built into them injustice, and so must end their tenure of the earth. He says any government who blindly follows market forces, there is a place for market forces, but if you follow it blindly into areas in which it has no place, in whether people should eat or not eat, in education, in healthcare, then that government is taking its country into oblivion. He is taking it to the edge of a precipice.
But still this government would say, yes, but we are helping the poorer countries with aid. I mean, all kind of aid, financial aid.
We give financial aid.
1% of their national BNP, I think they call it.
Yes. Even if they gave it the full 0.7% of the gross national income, it would still not be aid, because it is also always tied to interest. And the poor countries have to repay the aid plus the interest on the aid. And more money flows from the poorer countries to the developed world in repayment of the loans and the interest on the loans than is flowing in the other direction from the rich countries. So it's not aid, it's usury. All that aid is at 6% or 10% or 8%, and we have them over a barrel, as we say. There's nothing they can do about it. They get poorer and poorer, and the rich get richer and richer. And that is not only immoral, it's dangerous for the future life of all humanity, because the tensions inherent in that discrepancy have within them the seeds of a third world war, and that would be nuclear and would destroy all life.
So, and that's why the masters of wisdom
that's
and
why they're here
entering
at this time
the world, because we as human beings, our politicians, are not able to solve these problems.
We are able to do it, but we don't have the heart to do it. We know that these things happen. Governments are made up of relatively intelligent men and should know these things. If I know it, they should know it. You know it, they should know it. But they don't act on it because they're greedy, selfish, and they're locked into competition. Competition is market forces is to do with competition. All the nations of the developed world create the same things. We can all do it. motor cars and refrigerators and radios and televisions. So they're all creating the same goods. And every effort is then spent in selling them to each other. But we don't need each other's goods. We make them ourselves. You know, what you make, the British make and the Americans make, and it's only a question of who makes it a little bit better, cheaper. And so, to make it cheaper, you have to make the cost of making it less. And to make the cost of making it less, you have to lower the standard of living of your personnel. So the first person to go is the man who makes it. You reorganize, you make it, you produce more, you produce it faster, and you produce it cheaper, because you don't have to pay 1,500 employees that you paid last year. They're out of a job. And so you have the growth of unemployment. In places like Germany, it's like 14%, in France, 11%, and in America, about 7-8%, and only in Britain it's relatively low, but it's still 3 or 4%. And I think in Holland it's growing, it's reasonable at the moment. But that's the choice. Competition makes for unemployment. It throws people onto the job market and the dole and poverty, and millions of people, even in the developed world, are living in total poverty.
Mm-hmm. So the masters are concerned about the world as a whole, humanity. What's their vision on our being as souls and living persons? How do they see life?
They see us as gods in potential.
All of us, even the primitive living in Africa or
everybody in the world is a potential god. It's a question of how long it takes you to demonstrate that divinity. The masters have done it because they've gone ahead of us, and they have their disciples who are not masters, but who are on the way to becoming masters at different levels, you see. Even among the masters there are different levels. Some are, taken higher and higher and higher initiations. So they know more, they experience more, they're more aware of things that we can't even begin to, cosmic awareness, things we can't talk about.
Mm-hmm. Cosmic awareness, there are several levels. The Master have reached some level. Where is God in this total?
We are God. All of us are God. Uh-huh. God is not outside us. God is inside every single human being.
But we don't demonstrate
the divinity, that godliness. The masters do, and you will see when they're in the world, more and more people will follow their example. They can show. It's like holding up a mirror and showing what a god is like.
Mm-hmm. But now, in these days, our world is in great turmoil. Why don't they come forward immediately and say, boys and girls, up to here and no further?
Because we have free will. And free will, we can infringe. We do infringe each other's free will all the time. That's why people are starving, starving in a world which is overflowing with food, It's not a shortage of food that makes people starve. There's food rotting away in the storehouses of the developed world, which the people in the underdeveloped world need. They need it on a daily basis, and they die because they don't have it. But it's not for want of the food. There's a huge surplus of food in the world. No, the masters give us this opportunity to grow. If they did everything for us, just like a child, if you do everything for your child, he doesn't grow. He can't become adult, or he becomes stunted. He'll grow in his body, but his mind and his spirit will not grow, and he will not be in command of his own life. Mm-hmm. You have to have free will, and it's that free will which makes us divine. It's a divine quality, and for them it is sacred. They will never infringe our free will. So people say to me, well, why don't they come now? Why don't, look at the world we're living in. It's, you know, people are starving, people are being killed, there are wars, but we do all this. The masters don't do it. They've never made a war in their lives, you know.
But if our audience hears this, he would say, they would say, yeah, we are not that powerful as our politicians. They have to do it. What can we do?
Because they don't realize, they think they're alone. But they're not alone. There are millions of people exactly like you and me and them. And it is the bonding together, the marching together, the demonstrating together, the announcing together of the demand for sanity in life, for sharing, for justice, for peace. And humanity is beginning to do it. Groups throughout the world are marching, millions at a time, 12 million people against the war in Iraq on one day across the world. 12.5 million people. It's enormous.
But still it had no effect because Bush is going on with his war.
Bush is out of control. And it is absolutely imperative that he does not win the election in November. The American election, November 2nd. It is absolutely essential that the Democrats win that election.
That's what you say, or does hierarchy say this?
Both of us. Hierarchy say, and I would say anyway, even if they didn't say.
Isn't that infringing the free will of humanity? They are now on a political.
No, they don't. They don't say you have to vote this and you have to vote that. No, but they say if you vote one way, you get continuation of war and violence and so on. If you vote another way, you have the possibility of peace.
But Bush is saying such a sensible thing, war on terrorism, those people killing others or beheading others, it's good to destroy them.
The masters say there is a cause of terrorism. You have to look at the cause. What creates terrorism? Terrorism is the result of injustice and will only cease in the world not through war and terror. You can never defeat terrorism by the force of arms. Never. There are millions of people ready to die for their cause and become terrorists. And that has been the nature of the humanity for thousands and thousands of years. People given a cause will die for that cause. And that's what the terrorists today are doing. My master says terrorism is like the Hydra, if you know the story of Hercules.
Greek mythology.
Exactly. Every time Hercules cut off a head in the Hydra, the monster, two heads grew in its place. And that is what terrorism is. It's a Hydra and cannot be defeated in the ordinary way. So the only way you can ever end what they see as a canker in our midst, they abhor terrorism, but they see it as the result of injustice. And not until we have justice will we conquer terrorism. And that can only come through the principle of sharing. When the developed world accepts the principle of sharing, it says, right, the food, the resources of the world belong to everybody. We are only the custodians of these resources, and share them more equitably around the world, then we will see the end of war and the end of terrorism, but not before.
What will happen if Bush wins the elections?
Then we will have a terrible 4 years ahead.
Things deteriorating.
Look at Iraq. Iraq under Saddam Hussein, who was a tyrant, a dictator and so on, was united. Only Saddam Hussein could keep together Iraq, which is made up of Kurds and Iraqis and about 3 other different types of people, Sunni Muslims, Shiites, and those who are nothing at all, different kinds of army and so on. They were all held together with the iron fist of Iraq. And they were stupid. I really mean this. The Americans were ignorant and therefore stupid in their attack on Iraq. Because they got rid of him and it released a terror. My master said they opened, Pandora's box. The seal of Pandora's box, he said, has been broken. And out of it has stepped a monster, out of control. And there in Iraq you have a monster, out of control. And whatever the Americans do, it will only make it worse.
Because terrorism is becoming international now. In
Precisely.
Russia, in Spain.
There wasn't any terrorism in Iraq. They didn't terrorize America or Britain. And yet America and Britain attacked Iraq on the pretense that they were under threat from Iraq. They weren't under threat from Iraq. There's no way Iraq could threaten America, even if it had nuclear weapons, which it didn't have. Even if it had weapons of mass destruction, which it didn't have. And who is to say who should have weapons of mass destruction? As I said, 28 nations have weapons of mass destruction. America has more than anybody else. Britain has plenty, France has plenty, China has plenty, Russia has plenty. I mean, who is to tell other people that we can have them, but you're not going to have them? It's a nonsense. It's totally unfair. I don't mean it's not fair that you're not allowed nuclear weapons or anything. I mean, to be the policeman and tell other people what to do, and at the same time you commit every crime in the book, is wrong. All those who are against the war thought it was illegal, preemptive. It was done under the wrong pretensions, filled with lies, and so on.
What was the intention of America entering Iraq?
There were two intents. From Mr. Bush's point of view, he had to topple Saddam Hussein, get rid of Saddam Hussein, and prove that he was a better man than his father. It's a psychological thing.
Because his father went to
His father
Iraq.
went into Iraq, but he didn't get rid of Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Because it was under the United Nations, and that was the mandate. The mandate did not include regime change. So Bush Jr. said he was the outcast of his family, and he drank, and he was, a bad lot. And then he got religion, and he became a good lot, and he became fanatic, and he's a fanatic. But psychologically, he wanted to prove to his family, above all his beloved father, that he was a better man than or as good a man as his father. But from the administration point of view, Cheney and Rumsfeld and those around him, those behind Bush, to get their hands on the oil of Iraq, which is the second biggest deposit of oil in the world.
So that's the real reason.
The real reason was the oil. The second reason was Bush's first reason, was to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Now they got rid of Saddam Hussein, but they don't know they've got rid of Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein was injured in the very first strike on Baghdad. He was in his palace, and the bombs came out, thousands of tons of bombs, and part of the palace was destroyed, and he was very badly injured, and he died 2 days later. Saddam
2 days
Hussein,
later, but we see Saddam.
no, you don't. What you see, the Americans have brought out a stand-in. Saddam had a number of stand-ins. The man that was brought out was living under the ground, with $800,000 as cash, and still living under the ground. If that man had wanted to, he could have gone anywhere with 800,000. You could buy your way out of Iraq to any country.
Saddam.
Anybody could do it. And of course Saddam Hussein had millions of dollars, not just 800,000. He had millions, billions of dollars salted away. He had the money if he had wanted to leave Iraq. he could have done it in a twinkling. Easy as pie.
So this is
But
what
he didn't
your
do it.
master says, that
The
Saddam-
man that they have brought up and found under the ground, and they planked this $800,000 on him. He didn't have it. They put it there. The force were not an army. They were an intelligence force who surrounded him and captured him. And they say he's Saddam Hussein. He's not. He's a cousin of Saddam Hussein.
But they tried to prove it with DNA, and so
No, they didn't have the body. They never had his DNA. They proved it with the DNA of his sons. And he has similar blood because it's the same family, but it's not exact and it's not Saddam Hussein. I asked the master if the son would be about 97% the same as Saddam Hussein, and the cousin would be about 70% of
The
Saddam
DNA,
Hussein,
huh?
the DNA. And that's what they took. And I saw an interview with Rumsfeld when he was asked this very question. Was it Saddam Hussein? He said, yeah, sure it was. He said, but exactly? He said, well, 90% is good enough. 90% is not good enough.
Yeah.
It has to be 100%. Otherwise, that person is not that person. And they know that this is not Saddam Hussein. When that person appeared in April last year on a Iraqi television, he was presented as Saddam Hussein. He got on a car and started talking to the people and shaking hands and waving. And the body language was completely different from Saddam Hussein. And that is the guy that they dug out the ground and said, but now with a beard, Then he didn't have a beard. And if you saw him besides Saddam Hussein, you could say they're similar, but they're not the same person. Absolutely not the same person. And when his wife was allowed to see him, she ran out screaming, "That's not my husband! That's not my husband!"
Mm-hmm.
The wife of Saddam Hussein.
She said it.
She said that. Yeah.
Yeah,
She
but
should
we
not.
didn't. We didn't.
No.
see this.
Well, this is many people saw that same thing. Now the thing is that in April of last year, when Saddam the so-called the cousin appeared, he talked to the group and the Americans said that is not Saddam Hussein. He is a stand-in, an imposter, and they were right. But now they say the same man is Saddam Hussein. It's exactly the same man as they denied last April.
So according to the master, what happened to the body of the real Saddam?
He was taken to Tiflis, is it? Right up in the north.
Tilkit?
Tilkit.
Yeah.
Tilkit. They're original, where they all came from. The whole family are buried there. Saddam Hussein is buried there.
Who buried
His sons.
his sons, who were killed
Later
afterwards?
killed, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't have the blood of Saddam Hussein, they have the blood of the sons only to compare with the blood of the cousin. And it's just as near as a cousin can get, but it's not Saddam Hussein. They know this. The Americans know this. It's a trick.
When will this come out?
I don't know. I think it's a terrible chance they are taking because it's bound to come out. It can't go on. I mean, they can shoot him. They could, let him away and then fire a gun at him. He's escaping, pretend he's escaping and kill him. But I don't think even that would, his wife will talk, his children will talk. They know that he's not Saddam Hussein. His uncle so-and-so. It's a terrible chance they're taking to present this man as Saddam Hussein, knowing that he's not Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was dying,
He had cancer. So.
Yeah. He had only about a year to live. The Americans knew that. And so they wanted to topple him and get their hands on the oil of Iraq before he died, and then they didn't know. The sons would take over. They might never get another chance to do it. So this was one of the pressing reasons why they had to attack Iraq now and pretend it had all these weapons of mass destruction to give it a motive.
What's the relationship between Jesus, we know him as Jesus Christ, and Maitreya?
Well, Christians call him Jesus Christ, and they think he was the Christ. In fact, he was overshadowed by Maitreya, and that's the normal way for all the teachers of the world to come into the world up until today. They take a disciple, a very advanced disciple. Jesus was almost a master, not quite a master, and from the baptism to the crucifixion he was overshadowed by Maitreya. And so when he talked, it was really the ideas and thoughts of Maitreya that he was saying. When he cured or did miracles and so on, it was Maitreya doing it through him. At the crucifixion, Jesus died on the cross, and Maitreya resurrected the body in the esoteric, occult sense of the word, in that he reactivated, not only brought him back to life, but brought him back to life as a master. Now Jesus was not quite a master, but Maitreya is the master of the masters, and he re-entered the body on the third day, and he was showed to the disciples, several times. For 40, it says in the Bible, 40 days he appeared. My master was 42 days. We're not going to quarrel.
Now you're saying Maitreya
now, Maitreya therefore worked through Jesus, just as the Buddha worked through the Prince Gautama. Gautama wasn't the Buddha. He was a prince, he was an advanced initiate, but not a master even. And he was overshadowed by the Buddha for much more than 3 years. It was a long life. And he brought the ideas of the Buddha to the world. And that is the way it has happened every time, every roughly 2,000 years, or in between also, such an event takes place until now. For the first time in history, the teacher, in this case the world teacher, has come literally himself into the world, Maitreya in a physical body, living in London, and one day will be seen everywhere.
But I can imagine Sai Baba devotees who will hear this, they are taught, or they believe, they are convinced of Sai Baba being the world teacher, the Jagat Guru, as they say. Is there a relationship between Maitreya and Sai Baba?
There is. They both embody the same energy, what we call the Christ principle. So we have two Christs in the world, Maitreya and Sai Baba. They're both Christ. Sai Baba devotees don't call him the Christ, and if you were to ask Sai Baba, are you God? He would say yes, but so you. You see, they forget this. They think that Sai Baba is the one and only God, but everybody is potentially God. That which is in Sai Baba as divinity is in everybody in the world, in the cosmos, because we are not the only planet on which there is humanity. Humanity is everywhere in cosmos, everywhere. And that divinity is in each one of those people at whatever stage of evolution they are, either at the beginning or at the end. It's the same divinity. You cannot divide divinity. If you ask Maitreya, say, oh, I worship you, he'd say, no, don't, please don't worship me. He said, when you worship me, you're putting me above you. I'm not above you. I'm exactly at the same point where you are. You're divine, and I'm divine, and there's only one divinity. So I cannot be above you. I'm a little older than you are, a little more experienced, and so on, by millions of years, And likewise with Sai Baba. It's the same. He's not above. He's simply further on evolution. Sai Baba is a cosmic avatar, Maitreya is a planetary avatar.
He came
And they
from
work
our...
together. Maitreya comes from our human evolution. He is the Alpha and the Omega.
Mhm.
The
And Sai
first
Baba
and the last. Sai Baba doesn't come from this earth. He's a visitor from outside.
from Cosmos.
Cosmos,
Somewhere in
Yes.
Cosmos.
Yeah, he says, nobody can know what he can Allah. I think I know, but
Now that Maitreya is in our midst, does he give signs to people?
the
that
world
he's-
is filled with signs. In one of the, he gave 140 messages, articles through me, which I voiced aloud for him, but I got telepathically. And one of them, in number 10, he says, "Those who search for signs will find them, but my method of manifestation is more simple. Yet the world is filled with signs." We have behind us here some of the signs. That sign is a window of a bank. It's about 35 feet high, and suddenly appeared this figure of the Madonna and Child on it. It is now like a temple, you know, the bank have given up being a bank.
Is it still
And
existing?
devotees, you see thousands of devotees come every day to this. It still exists. And after a few days or a few weeks, some vandals vandalized it, and broke
glass.
window and glass, and poured chemicals on it to make the colour disappear. And in a few days, it righted itself, it renewed itself.
This is a sign for Christians, I assume, but
yeah.
does he give signs to other
All
religions?
religions have their signs.
Mhm, but
Among Hindus, there is probably the most extraordinary sign of all. One day, in about 1996, I think,
some years ago, yeah.
yes, I mean, 96, I think, people woke up in India, in Delhi, but all over India, all in every Hindu temple in the world. We saw it in England, in the Hindu temple, the BBC took the cameras there, and so we could see it happening. And when the puja, where they gave milk to Ganesha, statues made of bronze, of wood, of marble, copper, steel, you know, everything, silver, everything you can think of. The god appeared to drink that milk. The milk disappeared. If it was a spoonful, it disappeared. If it was a jugful, it disappeared. Every offering of milk to a god disappeared in seconds like that. Hundreds of thousands of gallons of milk disappeared over 4 days. In India, people lined up, all the shops closed, they lined up to go to the temple, some of them for the first time in their lives, and they all carried a jug of milk, you know, or some milk to take. And where they offered it, the milk disappeared. And when the priests were asked what did it mean, this miracle, well, the milk disappeared, well, the gods drank the milk. How is it possible? They said it means a great soul is in the world, a great teacher is coming or is here, and so on. And of course they're right.
Yeah.
This went on for 4 days in India. I know a group in Los Angeles who went to a temple for 2 weeks afterward, and the same event occurred for 2 weeks. We saw it in England.
Even here in The Hague, it was known that it
yeah.
happened. And the Muslims, what signs?
The Muslims have their own. When they cut fruit, for example, a melon or any kind of fruit, tomato and so on, they see the seeds of the fruit rearranged, and it says, "Allah is great. Muhammad is his messenger."
in Arabic.
In Arabic.
Allahu Akbar,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, but it's all just transformed from the seeds of the fruit. And, you know, there are other Christian ones, the Madonnas which weep tears and blood, the faces of Jesus which weep tears and blood, or statues of the crucified Christ which ooze a kind of nectar, an oily nectar. out of the wood. It just comes out of wood. So the world is filled with miracles. The age of miracles has never stopped, but it has gathered momentum. And my information is this will continue and continue, growing in and more extraordinary until the day of declaration.
In what way Maitreya will present himself to the people?
We call it the day of declaration. When enough people are responding to him, to what he's saying on television and radio and so on, when enough people are gathering, not necessarily around him, but aligning themselves with his ideas, calling on their governments for sharing and justice and freedom and peace in the world for everybody. It will be like he has organized a huge mass world public opinion, and when that reaches a certain intensity, then they will ask for him to appear and speak to everybody, and he will come on the television sets of everybody in the world. It will be arranged by the world's media through the linked television networks, and so we will see his face on the screen at a certain time. It will be different throughout the world, of course, but the one time it will take place, I'm sure, in London, but it will be
released all over the world.
Yeah. And so, in daylight or darkness, in the middle of the night, or whenever it is, wherever you live, you will see this face. By now, familiar face, but he will not have declared himself as Maitreya, as a world teacher, as the head of the spiritual hierarchy, but as a man like us, concerned with these problems of justice and sharing and right relationships and peace. And when enough people are showing they want this, then they will have him speak to the world. But he won't actually speak. He's omniscient, he's omnipresent, and he will create a telepathic link with the whole of humanity simultaneously. So we will all hear him, but in our own language. This is the true happenings of the Pentecost 2,000 years ago, when the Jews came from all the different parts of the world and they spoke in tongues. Well, they didn't speak in tongues. Maitreya overshadowed the disciples and the peoples there, and they all heard the voice which was coming from Maitreya as if they were speaking in tongues. Maitreya will do it only now on a world scale. This is the most extraordinary event ever. And people will tell it to their children, and they'll tell it to their children, and on into history. Were you there? My great-great-great-great-grandfather said it was the most wonderful experience he ever had, when he heard Maitreya's voice in Arabic or Greek or Russian, Hindi, in Chinese or whatever, and we will all hear him. Our brains will automatically transform his thoughts, his ideas into our own mother tongue, whatever it is.
And after that, people will accept him, and
they will already have accepted him. Uh-huh. Then on that day, it will be so extraordinary. He will give a kind of history of the world, a history of humanity. Humanity is so old we can't begin to. According to the masters, humanity is 18.5 million years old. We think about 3, 4, maybe 5 million at the most, 18.5 million years. And we have been through tremendous happenings during that time. The masters have created, when they lived openly in the world, they created brilliant civilizations which we don't even know exist. Prehistory for us. But he will reenact and show them to people in their minds. They will see in their mind's eye the past. And they'll see themselves only in previous bodies, way back in time. And At the same time, he will show the future and the science of the future, the extraordinary scientific marvels of the future, which we will command the ability to roam freely in our solar system. You know, it's quite extraordinary. And at the same time, his energy, the energy of love, will flow out in tremendous potency through the hearts of all humanity. And this will invoke an intuitive understanding of what he's saying and a belief in what he's saying. And at the same time, on the physical plane, there will be hundreds of thousands of spontaneous miracle cures, healings throughout the planet. And in these three ways, we will know that that one, and only that one, is the Christ if you're Christians, the Imam Mahdi if you're Muslim, the Messiah if you're Jews, the Kalki avatar or Krishna returned if you're Hindu, or if you're Buddhist, Maitreya Buddha.
You say that you are in telepathic rapport with your master, or maybe even Maitreya. At your lectures, you are being overshadowed by Maitreya. Can he bless our audience with an overshadowing or so?
Yes, I'm sure I can arrange it. Yeah. Wait for me a little longer only, and you will find your dreams fulfilled. So will it be, and soon my nourishing love will strengthen and invest your life with joy. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Creme.